Hi people, welcome to BK Jazz Dance here in the Dance Lab. One of the key things I want to share with you is my journey as a dancer. And I want to share a story in regards to learning, becoming a leading mambo jazz dancer. And that all started in a club called Berlin, which was created in 83, 86, between 83 and 86. And I want to say first of all that African diaspora women was involved in the development of mambo jazz. This club was a club unique. It was the most progressive club in the whole of the UK. Manchester's club scene was 7 days a week, and this club was on a Tuesday. When I went to this club, I did nothing but dancing. It was a grounding for all days, events where you danced all days, but events where you competed against other dancers. I used to use Berlin as a grounding for my development of my style, pushing the boundaries of my stamina, my creativity every week through to 83, 86. And I was in there longer than the leading DJ, which is the leading DJ, Colin Curtis and Hugh and Clark. And it was a club where we dressed in vintage clothes. It was a serious club for fashion. And the fashion was a statement. People who wore clothes in that club, we didn't wear it for pretentiousness. We wore it as a statement of who we were, our independent thinking. The best creatives, the best unconventional thinkers, the best artists, the singers, writers, producers. You might as well say, like the Harlem Renaissance. These people, this is the club they went to. Do you understand? As an individual. And what it was unusual. It was one space, a very beautiful bohemian place. It was a dingy place, but that's how it goes. But what happened was, they played 30% rare groove and 70% obscure jazz. Every week the jazz was playing, some new jazz was coming. So what happened, DJs, record collectors, from London used to come there every week to pick up new jazz, what was new to buy. Every week they would do that because the DJs were pushing the boundaries of the music. It was the most experimental period for a DJ called Colin Curtis and Hugh and Clark. I was in there longer than Hugh and Colin Curtis because Colin Curtis had a mental health breakdown and he left the club. And I'm going to talk a little bit on that very quickly. What happened, the demise of the club, a lot of misinterpretations are out there. The demise of the club was when Colin Curtis, the DJ, what happened was when he got ill, they brought in substandard DJs that did not have the depth of music that the people he had and the depth of music we had. Because we were collecting music, just exactly as the DJs, we had music equivalent to them or even more than them. The reason we didn't become DJs because one, many black people couldn't become DJs, that's one, but secondly, we didn't want to be DJs, but we definitely wanted the music. And so what happened, we were finding music. Manchester was a city of finds. I was going across all over the country, I had people all across the country and around the world sending me records, sending me reel-to-reel tapes, because you didn't care, you didn't get the up-to-date music, you wanted obscure jazz. As long as it was danceable, then it was cool. And what happened, Manchester had a few places where you could buy jazz, buy new jazz, buy old jazz, which people couldn't hear. And that place was called Yanks. And I bought everything out there. And I was listening to experimental music. So one of the key things I want to share that was important, Berlin was a club. It was a cosmopolitan club. Sisters were involved in this art form as well as other cultures, but sisters were involved in it. And I'm stating that because they've been written out of it. And I'm not going to have them be written out of the UK jazz dance culture. Is unacceptable to me as an individual at the moment, because what's happened is being reflected. What you see is different cultures dancing the dance style. Look up when you look at jazz, whose movement is it? It's African diaspora woman's movement. And so when individuals are dancing now, people talking of just think, oh, she's a woman from Russia, she's a woman from Japan. Look at the way she's dancing. Is that the way Japanese dance? No, it isn't. Is that the way the Russians dance? In a black way? No, they had to come from where? The woman, African diaspora woman. Do you know what I mean? And so when people say, oh, African diaspora women were involved in it, I said, well, who's that movement? Because we danced with women in the city of Manchester. And what happened, most importantly, DJs played for women in our city. And what happens is important. They had women dancers all across the country. So I used to meet dancers in Leicester, meet dancers in Chester, meet dancers in London. Who dance? Women dancers. And I refuse to allow that not to be stated. Now, Berlin was a unique club. Like I said, it's a club that we practice. It was a club where I became a leading exponent of mambo jazz. I was renowned for my clothes before I went there as an individual. And the club scene was 7 days a week. So I used the club culture, all of it, to prepare for all dayers. All days is when you saw dancers. It was like a fashion show. Because you're there all day. You had to have garments for all day dancing. Do you understand? And Manchester's club scene was unique because we all danced in the same space. See, some places they had, for example, in Preston, they had 2 rooms. So they had a jazz room upstairs, and downstairs they had soul, funk, hip hop. That's what happened. But within Manchester, in Ritz, everything happened. There were just breaks, hip hop breaks, house breaks, soul, disco, funk breaks in the same space. So what happened was like a fashion show, because I used to dress in all the different clothes, go and get dressed. Some funk, so a funk break, have funky clothes. Soul's coming on, soul clothes, jazz clothes. That's how it was. That's uniqueness. And you saw women dance. So, and hundreds of people are there. So this is important. But what you need to know, Manchester's dance culture has been omissed from the history significance. Without Manchester's culture, nothing else could exist. And I'm telling you that in this room. Without the North of England culture, it couldn't have existed. Because, and sustained. Because our culture was one of, that was one inclusive. It didn't marginalize other styles. That's what happened. So what happened when we had a dance floor, we didn't have a jazz floor upstairs, so the jazz people were separated from the soul, disco, funk and house. We were the soul, disco, funk, house people. So it brought an inclusiveness, it brought an inquisitiveness to learn all different dance styles. That's what people need to understand. So we saw everybody came to Manchester all days. Everybody came to Northern all days who were interested in our style of music. I'm telling you, I've seen the best dancers that you could ever want to see in the history of time. And so when individuals in the mainstream world said my art form was not an art form, I decided as an individual who, first of all, self-trained dancer, I started to do ballet contemporary as part of my exploration in kind of UK jazz dance, because the whole influence of our creativity came from bebop, it came from cool, and it came from modern, which was push the boundaries of your learning, thinking, and development. They looked at classical music. Bebop, modern, and cool had no prejudices against music. And I took that on. I had no prejudice against dance, but other people had prejudice against us and the prejudice dancers. I followed the roots. I followed organizations that opened up to be inclusive. So contemporary dance was one. Jazz, always. Tap dance, always being involved. African dance, you see it. People are exploring to work with Caribbeans, working with jazz dancers, etc. I gravitated towards these things. And Berlin was that type of club. Berlin was, you just were open to anything the DJs played. You knew it was as a club. Have your mind open. Sometimes you didn't like other music, but you danced to it. You know why? Because let me explore it. And you might not have liked it at first, but the more you got into the tracks, yo, I like that track, I've got the track now. The more you understood, because it was a lifestyle, it was a culture, it was a movement, and it was about dress, it was about living healthy, well-being lifestyle. That's what it was about. And many people think, oh, I just wore clothes, what you call popping show, to be a peacock. I didn't wear clothes for a peacock. I didn't groom to be a peacock. Jazz gave me an identity. It gave me something. It boosted my self-esteem, my self-confidence, my self-improvement. It made me more inquiry-minded. It made me knuckle down more in my studies. Led me back into higher education many, many times. And it enabled me to stand out as an individual person, because there was a role for it. The role was for you to self-express yourself freely in who you are, what you are, and where you want to go, without peer pressure, without people trying to say you have to do this and do that. And I can't tell anybody how much it's very much changed, self-transformed me to be a bigger, better, bolder person, a bigger humanitarian, because it taught me to study. I studied jazz. I studied the era of jazz, what happened to the jazz musicians, what happened to black women in the jazz era was written out of history. And that's the reason when I'm talking at any other time, the black sisters involved, because she was the sister, we went to them to learn ballet, to learn tap, to learn music, for fashion. Many sisters were fashion designers. We went them to get our clothes made. They were involved in so many different ways, and I refuse their acts of achievement to be missed out. I refuse their legacy of leadership, of people who were humanitarians, who danced, who contributed, but didn't have a voice, because Western males had the voice and then made out that black males were the macho ones. It was the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard, but I must state it through video. Blue K Jazz Dance Out.